So recently the movie Weapons released on streaming platforms and I decided to give it a watch. I still don't completely know how to feel about this movie, but I want to break down this movie from my perspective. Before we get into this, obviously there's a spoiler alert. If you do intend on watching the movie and don't want it to be spoiled, I recommend you click off this video now. But if you don't mind, go ahead, grab a drink, a snack, let's get into it. So the movie opens up with our narrator, who is a child. And honestly, I don't know if it's one of the children that goes missing or a child that just goes to the school that this happens at. But this child is explaining exactly what happens leading up to the movie, which is at 2 o'clock in the morning, 17 children got up out of their beds, walked to their front door, and just ran in the weirdest way fashionable, in the weirdest way possible, into the darkness. But one kid didn't, and that's Alex Lilly. And they're all from the same classroom, which belongs to one of our main characters, Justine Gandy, or as I'm going to call her for the rest of this video, Miss Gandy. So we end up in this kind of like council or meeting, which is between the parents of the missing children, teachers and faculty of the school, and I believe press as well of the city. And the parents are angry, which is understandable, but I believe they're angry at the wrong person. All of them are pointing fingers at Miss Gandy because every single one of their children that went missing was from her classroom. But no one's looking to think of why Alex Lilly isn't missing. That confused me. Not saying I wanted the little boy to be missing, but like, go to his house. Figure something out. I also forgot to mention that this movie plays out in different sections, or what I like to call different chapters, focusing on each of our main characters' stories, and eventually they do intertwine and come back into like the main story, but I like it. So the first chapter we're going to get into is Justine, or Miss Gandy. And so one of the parents ends up standing up and actually calling out Miss Gandy and saying he wants to hear from her. He wants to know exactly what happened in that classroom for his and the rest of these parents' kids to just have up and disappeared in the middle of the night. And she gets up there and she's trying to explain to them that like she's just as confused as they are, and she really, really wants to find out what happened to these kids because these are her students. And shocks me a little bit because someone stands up and goes, she should be locked up until they find out what's going on. Wait a minute. I know you want to find your child, but she should be locked up. What are we talking about here? So eventually this little press conference ends and we're following Miss Gandy on her route home. She ends up stopping at a gas station and getting a little drink like I was doing when I was watching it. But as I've rewatched the scene, she got 2 bottles, like 2 whole bottles for the night. And while inside of that gas station buying her alcohol, she ends up coming across her first instance of like, okay, we have a stalker. Someone calls her phone and like says, you better watch your back because tonight's the night.
Tonight's the night.
And giving off real Dexter Morgan vibes, she just like kind of hangs up and walks out of the store and heads to her car, where she sees a car in the distance watching and observing her, which we later find out who that is, but that's at a later point. Okay. So now we end up following Miss Gandy back to her home, where she ends up trying to make herself a drink, but she gets a ring at the doorbell. She goes to check, but there's no one there. So she goes ahead and walks back, thinking probably just somebody pranking her. And then someone knocks loud as hell. And she freaks out with reason. She freaks out. She goes in her room, grabs some pepper spray, storms outside to find somebody put this on her car. And surprisingly, she still goes to work the next day. She heads into school after trying to, what I assume, wash it off all night. Just doesn't come off. She ends up heading into school. And she ends up coming into work to her boss telling her like, hey, stay home. We'll give you paid leave. Just stay home. And she ends up asking about the kid, Alex Lilly, and how she'd like to speak to him reasonably because he's the only child that didn't go nowhere. Like, let's see if he knows something. And her boss ends up kind of scrutinizing her a little bit about caring too much for the children because it's unprofessional and inappropriate that she hugged a crying child and gave a little girl who missed the bus a ride home. And he's giving this as a reason of like, you don't need to talk to Alex. It's not the problem that you don't care, it's a problem that you care too much. I'm kind of just like, somebody need to talk to little bro. I ain't gonna lie, somebody need to talk to him. And maybe I'm just saying that from a stand of like, I know what's going to happen, so somebody needs to talk to him, but somebody needs to talk to him. And so after this conversation, she ends up taking her car to the police station to file a report for vandalism because they wrote that on her car. And she also mentions the phone calls and like being followed around and stuff. And they're kind of just brushing it off to like, it could be some teenagers just messing around with you. And we end up seeing a glimpse of our next character that gets introduced, Paul. I think his name is Paul. Paul is a police officer, and in this moment of the movie, I assumed just a friend of Miss Gandy's. And they end up going to a bar, and they sit down, and you can kind of see there's a little tension where they do like each other, and Paul ends up bringing up that he hopes Miss Gandy or Justine didn't drive to the bar. And that kind of hints her issues with alcohol and how that's affecting how, I guess, the town's looking at her. But we've already seen that with the 2 bottles at the corner store. And so the conversation goes on a little bit, and Miss Gandy asks Paul about Donna, which at the time, no clue who Donna is, but we later find out that is his wife. And she asks, does Donna know you're here? And Paul just completely lies and says they're not really together right now. Or he worded it a different way, but that's what he tried to say. We're not really happening right now. What? So she ends up asking Paul, just have one drink with me, which he says no to. And then it cuts to them in a bedroom together. And I can only assume what happened in that bedroom and what led up to what happened in that bedroom. So after they do, Justine takes Paul back to his car because I guess they took hers back to her house. And on the way there, she asked him, like, how's work going? And he kind of just shrugs it off and goes, it's whatever. And she straight up presses him, like, what do you mean it's whatever? There's 17 kids missing. Are y'all treating it like it's whatever, or are you looking? Now, after this, Justine ends up following the little kid, Alex, from school to his house. And even though as a viewer, I wanted answers about what the hell's going on and why Alex is like the only one, child left, your boss told you no, you can't talk to him. Don't stalk him. What are you doing? Anyway, she goes to his house. She's creeping around. She ends up seeing that there's newspaper covering all the windows, so you can't see inside the house. There's no light getting in the house. It's creepy. She ends up finding a little sliver that she can peek through, and she ends up seeing 2 people sitting on a couch, just stoic, just sitting on like that. And it scares the hell out of her to the point where she trips, knocks some shit over, and honestly could have ended up waking up the whole neighborhood with the noises she made. But she ends up leaving and calling her boss again and like trying to explain to him what she saw, and that like she thinks they need to get like somebody involved because it doesn't look like a healthy living situation. And he's like telling her, I told you not to get involved. What are you doing? So shortly after this conversation, she has to go get herself another drink. This is a reoccurring thing. She has to get herself another drink, and as she's getting a drink, someone is walking up behind her looking like they are ready to sneak the shit out of her. And we ended up finding out that's Donna. And she did sneak the shit out of her and poured alcohol over her. After getting almost the shit beat out of her, she ends up going home. Still got her a bottle, we can assume, because she's drinking and sitting in front of the TV, wallowing away. And so she ends up drinking herself to sleep. She goes to bed and she wakes up inside the hallway of her school. She walks into her classroom to find all of her students asleep, but one in the back lifts his head up, Alex Lilly, the one that was left. And he has like this kind of, I don't want to say clown makeup, but it's creepy, just dead clown makeup. It's weird. He lifts his head up and just smiles at her, and she ends up waking up from this nightmare. And yeah, I'm gonna call it a nightmare, because there's nothing else you can call that. Upon waking up from the nightmare, she's looking down her hallway. Also, if I had like an open floor plan and my room looked down a hallway straight to the front door, I'm sleeping with my door closed every night. What the hell? Hell no. Hell no. Especially if my bed's right there. I can like look. No. But she ends up looking down the hallway. She just woke up startled, and eventually she calms down a little bit and goes to lay back down. There's a person on her ceiling. I'm gonna give you a jump scare warning. 3, 2, 1. That was on her ceiling. And as I'd assume it would do to anybody, it scares the ever-living shit out of her, and then it's just gone. Like, this person's just gone. She freaks out, she screams, she looks back up, it's gone. So I guess she just can't take it anymore. She can't listen to anything anyone says to her. And after that dream, she just needs to get some answers. So she stalks the little boy again and ends up actually getting out the car and talking to him this time. She gets out her car, she starts talking to him, and now that I am giving it a rewatch while I'm explaining this, she like kind of makes it about her. She's like, I know I've really been having a hard time, so I can't imagine. And he just like walks away and was like, I gotta go. And she tries to like get his attention again, and he screams at her like, stop talking to me, and runs into his house reasonably because did you just ambush him? Why did you just ambush him? I'm like, get some answers like, hey little guy, let's talk to him while he's in school or something, or you followed him home. Talk to his parents. Mind you, we haven't seen his parents. So it started getting hot in here, so I had to turn my fan on. So if you do start hearing that in the audio or in the recording, I'm sorry, but I ain't taking off my clothes. And so she ends up running after him, banging on the door, ringing the doorbell, trying to get someone's attention. No one answers. Now you would assume after this, she'd just go home. She'd leave it alone. But no, she sits out in her car all day in front of that house, drinking out of like a big gulp, drinking alcohol out of a big gulp, until eventually she falls asleep, still outside of this little boy's home. And as she's sleeping in her car, a figure emerges from Alex Lily's house carrying what at first I thought was a knife, but it ended up turning out to be scissors, and starts walking towards her car, like literally like she's about to stab her. We see her walk past the driver window and get in the back seat. Upon first watch, I'm like, why didn't Miss Gandy wake up? Now that I know she was drinking out of a big gulp, I can tell why she didn't wake up. This person that gets in the back seat ends up cutting off a piece of her hair, getting out and dipping. That's when I knew there was some shit going on. I knew something was up. Why are we cutting off hair? What's going on? I knew something was going on when the kids ran out at 2 a.m. running like Naruto characters, but why are we snipping off hair? That ends up being the end of Miss Gandy's chapter, and we end up starting Archer's chapter. Archer is the father of one of the children that ended up disappearing in the middle of the night. So Archer, like any other parent would, is really obsessed with trying to find where his child is. But unlike the other parents, he's one of the ones that's at the police station every day, asking them what leads have they found, what have they followed up on, have they used the K9 units. He even presses, I guess, the chief or detective, have you looked into the teacher? She has to know something. And he's trying to tell her, like, I don't think that's true, and Archer's just not buying it. And he ends up telling this officer he's done some digging of his own. And he looked into her past and she has 2 DUIs. And he kind of brings that up like 2 DUIs means that she's going to kidnap 17 children, which like I'm trying to figure out how that correlates. Like I get it, not her past isn't perfect. So he's trying to say like, hey, don't overlook her. But what does 2 DUIs have to do with 17 children going missing? He ends up also bringing up that she was let go from her old school for inappropriate behavior. And the officer's like, yes, with a member of faculty, not a child. And, Archer ends up like saying like, I'm just telling you, she's a troubled person. Dude, like, it's a phrase I hate. What the hell is a troubled person? My nigga, life is hard. We're all troubled. God damn it. And, so the officer ends up saying, what are you trying to tell me here? What do you want me to ask her about? Because, the kids walked out of the houses. We see them on the cameras. They walked out of the houses. No one pulled them out. No one forced them out the houses. Like, he says, quote unquote, what are you seeing that I don't, that would make her a suspect? And so after this exchange, we're brought back to that press conference, which Archer was the parent speaking in the beginning. And we end up getting his speech again, him talking about how she has to know something. He wants to hear it from her. And it cuts out her whole speaking part. And we end up seeing Archer's perspective of when they were leaving the conference. And we end up finding out that he's the one that was following her and watching her when she was at the liquor store. But not particularly the one that called her, though, but he was the person in the truck outside. He even followed her home, and we get a shot of his truck bed, which shows red paint, which matches up with the color of paint that was written on Miss Gandy's car. So we can safely assume that he was the one that did that childish ass ding dong ditching and wrote witch on the side of this lady's car. You know, we keep getting this shot where he's just watching his doorbell camera over and over again, trying to figure out exactly where his kid was running to. We also get a shot of him sleeping in his kid's bed, and we can assume he's been sleeping there since the kid left. So he's really hurt about this, which is extremely understandable, but he's trying to take on the role of detective because he doesn't believe that the detectives are taking up enough role into looking into Miss Gandy. And he ends up waking up in his son's room at 2:17, which is the same time that the kids left the houses, and hearing noises. He ends up going down saying, "Hey, Matthew, are you here?" And he ends up seeing his door open. When he walks out of his door, he sees his son running across the lawn, and obviously he goes to chase him, to figure out where he's going, try to get him back. And as viewers, we can obviously see that this is a dream, but at the time he doesn't realize. So as he's chasing Matthew, his son, he ends up running through some shrubbery and ends up kind of circling back to his house, and he sees his son run into his house, and then a big rifle, literally, hold on, quite literally this appears above the house with 217 going across that part, which confused the hell out of me. I'm like, okay, is this why y'all named the movie Weapons? Whatever. And he gets confused as well, because what the fuck? After it disappears, he ends up going into his house. He ends up running back up to his son's room and sees him sleeping in the bed, or laying in the bed. And he kneels down and he has a really heartfelt discussion with him about how much he loves him, and he doesn't say it all the time, but he means it and he wants to say it. And then we see this creepy figure, the same one that was hanging from Miss Gandy's ceiling, in Matthew's bed. Archer wakes up. As he's waking up, as he's starting to, get his day together or whatnot, I think he walks outside and he sees a cell phone tower. A cell phone tower that he realizes his son ran in the direction of. And he has an epiphany that he can draw out the line of the direction his son was running in. Since he was running in a straight line towards something, he can draw this line to figure out where he was running to. And if he gets the direction of another kid that was running in the opposite direction, or adjacent to that line, if you know what I mean, perpendicular, he can pinpoint a general area of where they were running to. So he ends up finding one of the parents whose kid ran perpendicular with his kid, and he goes up and he asks her, I had a Ring doorbell, I showed my footage to the police, I see you have one as well, can I possibly see your footage? And she straight up just says, no, I'm not comfortable with that. And he's like, okay, I'm thinking he's gonna leave, go find somebody else. He waits for her husband to get home and then asks him instead, as if he didn't just ask her. And he says yes, I can assume, because the next scene they're watching the footage. And so he sees the footage, he ends up finding out this perpendicular area that he's looking for, and he goes driving around in that little circle he drew on his map, just looking for something, trying to find a clue or something, I guess. And he ends up seeing Miss Gandy's car. Hard to miss it, he wrote witch on it. He ends up seeing her car pull into a gas station, and he pulls into it himself to confront her. And as he's confronting her and yelling at her, she sees, out the corner of her eye, her boss, Marcus, running towards them. But he looks like he's, one, running like the kids ran out the houses. Two, he has blood all over his face. And three, like this. I can't even, running at them like this. And he attacks them, but really he attacks her. And it's like he's a homing missile. He is locked onto her. He's trying to get him off of her. Archer's trying to get him off, but he's just locked in. He ends up crawling under the car and stuff. And she ends up getting away and running into the store, but he's still chasing after her. And Archer knocks him down, and they're tussling, and then it goes to black. Now we begin Paul's chapter. So we end up getting into Paul's story, and it starts off with him on the phone with his wife, Donna, and her telling him about this trip that she's going on, and she's only going to be there for 3 days. He thinks it's 6, but she keeps telling him it's 3. We also end up finding out that Donna's dad is this chief of police, lead investigator person that Archer's was talking to, and also Paul's boss. So after getting ready to patrol the streets, Paul hits the road. He ends up seeing Justine. They hit a little, and he's driving around, drinking on his Red Bull, and he sees another one of our main characters who we haven't yet to be introduced to yet, James, trying to break into a building, apartment, store, whatever. He's trying to break into somewhere. And so Paul ends up flashing his lights, chasing him down, and actually tackling him to the ground. Now, during this whole interaction, Paul seems really on edge. Like, yeah, I get you just chased someone, you just tackled them, but he's like shaking, really like it's weird. He's like shaking, he's really like just on edge. And James is like, hey, I just lost my keys, man. Like, you don't have to do all this. And eventually Paul stands him up, and he's like, hey, you shouldn't run from the police. Even if you did lose your keys, you shouldn't run from the police, man. I'm just going to search you real quick. Do you have any, like, regular police protocol? Do you have anything that's going to stick, poke, or stab me in your pockets? Let me know now. I don't want to get stabbed. James had a needle in his pocket, and it stuck, poked, and stabbed Paul. And Paul rocked his shit. Paul literally rocked his shit, and then like started freaking out about like the needle with good reason, with really good reason, because you don't want to catch anything, you don't want to get any type of disease or anything. So he's in the car, he's cleaning it, he's cleaning off the little wound he got from the needle, and he ends up looking up at his rearview mirror and seeing his dash cam, and then he goes into a full panic mode because he did just rock this cuffed unarmed person in the face, and he unplugs it, then goes out, lifts James up on the car, and he tells him, hey, you don't say anything about this, and I'm gonna let you go right now, but I never want to see you around here again. If I see you, it's gonna be a different story. And so, knowing he did wrong, he goes to tell his chief of police, which is also his father-in-law, and he just kind of brushes it off. He tells them, you really fucked up, but as long as this guy doesn't come report anything within the next month, that footage is gonna get wiped, and it'll be like it never happened. But if he does come and report it, you're in deep shit. And so after that, he gets back in his car, and he's having like the ultimate freak out because he just punched the unarmed civilian in the face for no reason. If he files a complaint, he's fucked. And, I hope he does file a complaint, because control your emotions, Paul. What the fuck? But he's pissed. He's in the car. He's freaking out. And Justine texts him, hey. And we end up kind of getting our first 2 characters' stories to meet up with them going into the bar. And on Paul's side of things, it's really short-lived because we don't get any other conversation. It's just them seeing each other at the bar and then them seeing each other in the bed, if you know what I mean. Then, Justine drops Paul off back to his car. He goes home, and to his surprise, which he shouldn't be surprised because she told him, his wife is home. And his wife is home. She comes downstairs. She's like excited, happy to be talking to her husband at first. And then she's like, where you been at today? And he was like, I was out. And she's like, Paul, what do you mean? Where you been at? And he's like refusing to answer. And she starts putting 2 and 2 together, and like, she's like, damn, you motherfucker. And I can only assume that's when she went over to the store and rocked Justine's shit. And now we cut to a scene. He's at work. He's ready, or he's getting ready again. And he's walking through his job, and he sees his father-in-law, and he just gets the eyes of death. So he keeps it pushing. He doesn't even stop. He keeps it pushing. He walks outside the job, and James, for whatever reason, is outside of the police station. And this sets him the fuck off. This is when I realized something is up with Paul, whether it is his drinking or he has like anger management problems. Something's up, because when he sees James, even though he's the one who rocked the shit out of James and unplugged his camera, he starts chasing him, and he's in the car like shaking and mean mugging and freaking out again. Like he's turning into a Kyle in that car, and he unplugs his dash cam before he even starts chasing him. and then he unhooks his shotgun in the car. Like, he's gonna kill this nigga. He's gonna kill this nigga. That section or chapter ends up ending, and we end up coming into James's chapter. So in this chapter, we actually end up finding out who James is. And I can tell you right now, from the very beginning, we find out James is living in a tent in the woods, and he's struggling with his crack pipe. And you know, there's different cuts and different shots of the tent, and there's more than just crack inside of that tent. James is a drug addict. He's a homeless drug addict, and he's pretty far gone because most of the whole telling of his chapter is just showing him, you know, trying to get money from people for drugs. He's even like telling his brother or somebody in his family on the phone that he's gotten a job, and he just needs a couple dollars to, you know, get like a nice outfit for work so he can look nice while he's at work. And you know, the whole time he's on the phone trying to convince this person to give him money, he's checking car doors, and he ends up opening a car door, and he steals a tiny pink backpack, which you can assume belongs to a little kid. And he tries to take this little kid's tablet that he finds in his backpack to a pawn shop, and the guy's just like, no. And he's like, what do you mean no? And the guy's like, I don't want this. It's like a little child's tablet. What am I going to do with this? Who's going to come in here and buy a child's tablet? And so after the pawn shop owner shoos him away, we end up finding out exactly what he was doing when Paul ended up coming across him. He was breaking into a place to try to find something to steal or sell to get drugs. And at this point, I realized that the movie does a great job of not showing us things we've already seen before, like this whole chase sequence and Paul punching James in the face and all that. We just come to the part where he's sitting him up and telling him, hey, I did you wrong. You did me wrong. Let's just never talk about this again. So Paul ends up walking around after this. He ends up coming across Alex Lily's house, which he can see there's like no mail being taken into the house. All the mail's like outside in the driveway. So he's assuming there's no one home. And so he ends up breaking into the house so he can steal their stuff. While rummaging through all their stuff in their living room, he ends up turning around and seeing Alex Lily's parents just still stoic on the couch. It freaks him out, but eventually he, I guess, realizes, hey, they're either dead or high as shit. So he ends up going back to just doing what he was there to do. He ends up going back to stealing their shit. And eventually he makes his way into the basement where he turns the lights on and he sees a bunch of children just menacingly standing down there. And he runs back upstairs, ends up tripping, falling. He runs back upstairs, ends up dropping this pillowcase of things that he's stolen. And as he's trying to pick it up, the parents get up and start walking towards him. And, you know, he just barely makes it out of this house. And after leaving, he doesn't question any of this. He goes straight to the pawn shop to sell the silverware he just stole from them. It's not until he's in the pawn shop and he sees the missing kids poster and sees the $50,000 reward that it clicks in his head that these might be those kids. He ends up calling the police and he's like, hey, is there really a $50,000 reward? He does not care about helping find the kids. He just wants this reward. He's like, I saw these kids. I'm not like just saying this for the money. Like, I genuinely saw them. I can show you where they're at, all this stuff. But he doesn't want to go back to that police station because of Paul. Eventually, I don't know what happens, but he starts walking towards the police station. And that's where Paul sees him for the second time and freaks the fuck out. And so we end up coming back together in the stories. And Paul is chasing James. James ends up running back to his tent. But before he gets to his tent, he sees this creepy figure that so far Justine and Archer have seen waving at him in the woods. And he's like, what the fuck? So he runs into his tent. He zips the tent up and he's just hiding in there. And something's rustling outside. Someone ends up unzipping the tent. And James stabs the person with all of his like meth needles, heroin needles, stabs him in the face, and it's Paul. Paul, as we assume, freaks the fuck out once again, but this time Paul has a shotgun in his hand. He pulls James out of the tent, puts the shotgun to his face, and James is like, wait. I know where the kids are. I know where the 17 kids are. And he's like, you're fucking lying. And he's about to blow his head off. And James somehow convinces him not to shoot him by just saying, I know where they are. I'm serious. They're in the basement of this house. I can show you. And Paul's like, okay. Pulls him up, puts him in cuffs, puts him in the back of the car to like show him where this house is. And before they pull off, he goes, do you have AIDS? Hepatitis? Something like that. And originally watching it, I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, was that the reason you were going to blow his brains out? Like, was that the reason you were going to kill him? Or did you just really want to kill somebody? You know, he ends up asking him. And James says, not that I know of. And Paul was like, all right, I'll take that. And drives off. And they get to the house. And this only further proves that James does not give a fuck about these kids. They get to the house and he's like, hey, I'm not trying to be rude, but how do I know you're not going to take the reward money for yourself? And Paul just looks back at him like, and gets out and leaves him in the car and walks up to the house. He ends up talking to somebody at the door, goes in, and does not come back out until like nighttime. And when he comes back out, he is in the same animalistic state that we saw Marcus, that we saw Justine's boss in, and he drags James into this house, like by his feet, drags him into the house. And that brings us to Marcus's story. Marcus' story starts when him and Justine is on the phone and she's talking about how she followed how she followed Alex home and saw that something was weird inside that house. And you know, it picks up at a part of the conversation that we didn't get to hear, which is where she says, I have to, by law, tell CPS about this. And so he comes in with an ultimatum. He says, I'll invite his parents to talk to me at school. You know, if you don't get CPS involved, we'll have a face-to-face, we'll talk to each other, we'll figure this out. But Alex's parents never show up. Actually, someone who says that they're his aunt shows up, and she's wearing this creepy ass makeup that we've been seeing. And it seems like she is the creepy figure that we keep seeing. And you know, she tells Marcus that like Alex's parents are really sick and he's not his legal guardian, but she's taking care of him. And she'll happily like get the parents to come in for a sit down and all this different stuff. And it just seems like he's falling for her really, really easily. And you know, she kind of tries to like make it as of, she kind of dances around the idea of his parents actually coming in. She says they're too sick, they can't leave the house. And he says, you know, someone made a welfare complaint and we have to make contact. And I'm not convinced that anything's wrong, but we still have to make contact. And we get this glimpse of her looking at one of his ribbons. It's like an award ribbon. I didn't really get a good look at it. It's like an award ribbon. We get a glimpse of her looking at it. And she said, who made this complaint? He's like, I can't tell you. We end up getting a shot of him at home eating some snacks with his husband. And Alex's aunt shows up at the house and she's like obviously putting on an act that she's in distress and she needs help and she needs to come in. And she comes in and she corners them and tells them like, hey, I know it's inconvenient, but I really need to speak about what we were talking about yesterday. And she plays off this fake cough and Marcus's husband is like, get her a glass of water. And she's like, actually, can you give me a bowl? I know it sounds weird, but I like drinking out of a bowl. What? And after he ends up giving her this bowl of water, she starts asking him, like, you haven't contacted the authorities yet, while pulling something out of her bag. And he's constantly telling her, no, but Gladys, this really isn't the right time. And she just keeps asking, you haven't contacted them, right? And she pulls out a stick with thorns on it that has his ribbon tied around it. And she's like, you haven't contacted them, right? And he's like, is that my ribbon? And she's like, answer the question. He's like, no, I haven't. She then cuts her hand open. And eventually, you know, she cuts herself. She's bleeding. She asks Marcus's husband to get her some alcohol. And she's like, oh, no, that's not necessary. And snips off a piece of his hair, which is something we've seen before. She then rings a bell, which makes Marcus like go into like this type state and wraps his husband's hair around this thorny stick and then breaks it. When she breaks it, Marcus loses it. and starts the reason there's blood on his face when he's going after Justine is because he headbutted his husband to death. The reason this right here, the reason he looks like this, yeah, he headbutted his husband to death. So from this scene alone, we actually get a lot of information that she is controlling people with whatever this thorn stick thing is. She's able to control people, and she's using other people's hair as kind of like a thing to turn them into a homing missile to this person. And after a while of him headbutting his husband, she ends up coming back over to the stick that's broken and dropping it in the water, which what I assume resets like this spell or whatever's going on. She then wraps what we can assume is Justine's hair around this stick and breaks it again, and Marcus takes off running. So we end up coming back to this scene where Marcus is attacking Justine and Archer is constantly pulling him off, but he is like tunnel vision onto her. And the last time we was at this scene, it cut out. But this time we find out that Marcus gets away from Archer and actually goes in the store and starts chasing Justine through the store. And he's doing this Naruto run thing that kills me when I see it. And he's seconds away from getting to Justine. And I'm thinking Archer's in the parking lot dead after seeing what Marcus did to his husband. And Archer comes out of nowhere and straight up just like spears him into like the coolers, like the liquor coolers. And she runs out the store, leaving both of them in there. But Marcus is like, he's locked the fuck in. He gets up and chases her out to her car, starts banging on the window while she fiddles around with her keys to try to get the car started, and punches the window out. And then she finally gets the keys in as he's like reaching in for her, growling like a zombie. And she pulls off and she's like, what the fuck? Girl, what the fuck should have happened when he was running across that street? Right now, get the fuck on. And he is like faithfully chasing her car. And Archer ends up getting back up and like getting in his car to follow them to help or what, to figure out what the fuck's going on. And it seems like Archer puts his car in gear to like hit this guy, hit Marcus. And as Marcus is crossing an intersection, another car hits him. And the car that hits him killed him, of course. So Archer ends up going to the hospital. He gets his hand fixed because his hand was fucked up from dolphin diving into some glass. He goes to get his hand fixed. He makes a police report. And as he's walking out of the hospital, Justine's there waiting for him. And they walk out of the hospital together. She ends up thanking him for helping. And he's like, are you okay? And she's like, talking about how Marcus was just fine and she's never seen anyone act that way. And he's like, well, actually, I have, because the kids were running just like him, just like they were locked in on one location, on one thing. The kids were running just like that. And he saw that because he's seen the different footages. And so he's explaining to her that his kid ran that same way. Someone else's kid ran that same way. And he like pulls out the map and he shows her that, if you assume that they were running to one thing or one person, just like Marcus was, and they were running in a straight line, the straight line intersects right here. And he shows her where it intersects. And she just goes, oh. And he's like, what? And she's like, that's Alex Lily's house, the boy who didn't go missing. And that is when we end up getting Alex Lily's chapter. And we end up following Alex Lily's story, and we start with him being in class. He gets out of class. It's a typical, he's being bullied by everyone else in his class, and they're really obnoxious. Like, someone kicked him, and he was like, stop. And so they started repeating what he was saying over and over again in the back of his head. I would have swung. I would have hit him with a 360 roundhouse. Like, get away from me. But he ends up waiting outside. He eventually gets picked up by his dad, and on the car ride home, Alex's dad explains to him that his Aunt Gladys is coming to stay with them because she's really sick, and he doesn't expect her to be there very long because he doesn't expect her to live very long, which is so fucked up to say to a child, but I guess he was being real. And, they get home, he interacts with his mom. His mom wants him to clean up the house, clean up the room. Your aunt's coming. And he does that, and we cut to him laying in bed at night and hearing a car door, so he walks up to the window and he gets his first glimpse at his aunt. who is getting out of the car, and his dad's helping him with her stuff, and she has like this tree, which is what I assume the branches or the sticks she used comes from. And we cut to the next morning, and he ends up peeking into the room where his aunt is sleeping, and he sees that she is a very sickly looking woman. But what creeps him out is the fact that she is staring at that door. Like, I know, I see you, nigga. I see you. So we end up cutting back to a scene of him in school eventually, and we find out that Matthew, Archer's son, is his bully. Which kind of makes sense, because Archer is kind of a dick. Like, this little dude literally just threw a pencil at Alex. And Justine is like, Matthew, what did you just do? And he's like, well, you said put our pencils down. That is not what she meant, you little fucker. Eventually, he ends up going home to find his parents in this stoic state. Now, they are talking a little bit, but they're kind of just like, how was school, Alex? And he's like, okay, this is weird. So he's asking his aunt, what's wrong with my parents? But she keeps like, they're fine, they're fine. And she's like trying to talk to him like she's his parent. Like, oh, we're going to do your schoolwork and I haven't seen you in so long and this and that. And he's not listening. So he grabs a cup of water and splashes it on his dad's face. And his dad does not like budge, flinch, or anything. And he's like, what's wrong with my dad? And she gets angry and she's like, you're going to go upstairs, you're going to do your homework and go to sleep, and you're not going to have dinner tonight. And Alex is just like really concerned. And so the next morning ends up happening, and he goes downstairs to find his parents are still in this stoic state, and his aunt is sitting at the table like she knew he was coming down at that time. And she just goes, hey, come here, sit down. And eventually she ends up showing him that she can get his parents to hurt themselves or anyone she wants at any time she wants. And she essentially shows him and us as the audience the way that her sticks that she breaks works. And she does this as a way of keeping him quiet about her being there, and also his parents being the way that they are. She tells him, don't tell a living soul about what you've seen, essentially, or else I'm gonna make your parents hurt themselves. And eventually he ends up going to school. He listens to her. He doesn't say a single thing about anything that he just saw at home. And when he comes back, he finds her like meditating in front of like this tree, and it looks like a little bonsai tree, but it has thorns. And she's meditating in front of it, and she's like, we're not talking today. No talking. So he just goes and makes some chicken noodle soup to feed his parents, which they placed like it was like product placing, like they were sponsored by Chicken Noodle Soup or something. But he goes to make the soup to feed his parents and stuff, and then we end up cutting back to him in class, once again doing his work. And then he's at the store buying more soup for his parents, and I mean, like, he's stocking up on this soup. Like, he's prepared for this. And so after he ends up feeding his parents again, we go to a scene of him laying down. He gets up to wander the house once again and check in and see what the hell this lady that's infiltrated my space is doing. And he finds her like puking into a pot, and he, being like a genuine kind-hearted child, asks her, even though she just threatened the life of his parents, do you want some water? Like, what can I get to help you? And she's like, water won't help me. And he's like, well, what about the hospital? And she's like, a hospital won't help me. I was hoping your parents could help me, which makes me assume she's stealing people's energy to make herself feel better, to make herself not sick anymore. And Alex asks, like, well, what can help you? And she's like, listen to this. You go to school, get me an item that belongs to each one of your classmates, and that just might make me feel real good. And so even Asher is questioning this shit, like, how would that make you feel better? And she's like, it's exactly what I need. I don't know. And so he's like, okay, if you got better, will you get the fuck out of here? Will you go home? And she's like, yeah, I'll go home. So obviously, thinking that this woman is gonna leave them alone, Asher goes to school and he grabs all of his classmates, like name tags for their little cubby holes, and he brings them back to her. And you know, she ends up working her magic with him and rings that little bell, and all the kids start running towards their house. And so Alex is kind of sitting there as they're running into the house, like, what the fuck? And now we end up at where the kids disappeared that next day, that very day that he was in class by himself. And we see that this whole time he's been carrying, knowing this knowledge. And the aunt has like full control over these people, and even Alex, she almost has control over, because she has control over his parents. And detectives search the house at a certain point in time just to like figure out why was he the only person left. And she made the kids like go off into the woods for the night and stuff. And she's been able to make the parents less docile, and like they can talk and they seem normal. And this whole time, Alex, just like he was feeding his parents, have started having to take up the role of feeding the kids in the basement, because that's all they're doing. They're just kind of like the parents, just sitting in the basement. And now Alex comes home from school, and there's two new people standing in the house. Paul and James sitting just stoic, just like his parents. And he goes to run upstairs, and his aunt's like, "Hey, pack your things, we're leaving tomorrow." And we've come like full circle to the story now. Everything has come like back together. Well, actually, it hasn't come back together yet. Alex is sleeping in his bed, and I guess that morning he wakes up and looks out his window and he sees a truck outside. And that truck is Asher and Justine's truck. Or not Justine, but it's Asher and Justine in that truck. And now the story comes full circle. And as they're sitting out there, I guess Gladys gets Paul to go outside and just do this. And that makes them think, "Oh, Paul's here. He's figuring it out. He said, 'Come in. Let's go in.'" Not knowing that Paul is under the same control that they just witnessed Marcus being under. And they end up going in, and Paul's like standing off in a corner, still not saying anything. And Justine, having some type of liking to Paul, is like worried, like, "Paul, what's going on? What are you doing? Why are you standing over there?" And she starts walking towards him, not seeing that there's like a line of salt on the ground. And Archer looks down and he sees this, but Justine starts walking towards it, and Archer's like, "Wait," but she steps into it, and that's when James pops out the cut. Didn't even know he was anywhere to be found. James pops out the cut and attacks Archer, and Paul starts attacking Justine. And it's almost like Gladys has used these little salt things like tripwires to protect herself, because outside of her room door, she has Alex's parents sitting, and she has salt right there as well. And she even said, "Don't step in the salt." And that's like her little bodyguard sitting outside her room while this is all going down, because she has not emerged. It's like she doesn't even care. She's not worried. So Archer beats the shit out of James. Easy peasy. But Paul is like rabid. He's going after Justine, and she's gotten away and threw a fucking pan at him. Like cast iron pan, frisbeed it to his face, and he didn't budge. Now, the whole time this is going on, little Alex is upstairs standing outside of the door with the salt and his parents. He decides, "Let me step in the salt." And his parents go towards him, like attacking him. And that brings us to one of the most disturbing and unnecessary scenes that this movie has. Is after Alex runs and locks himself in his room when his parents goes to chase him, we go back down to Justine and Paul's scuffle. And Justine is pinned up against one of the cabinets being choked by Paul, and she goes to grab like the nearest thing to her, and she grabs like a potato peeler. It just starts peeling Paul's face. And after the first peel, it's like, okay, that didn't faze him. Let's try something else now. She does it again. And I'm just like, I really didn't need to see that. I didn't need to see that. After that scene, we end up having like, I guess, this comedic relief of James constantly trying to like get up and charge Archer. But Archer is just way stronger than him, and he keeps punching him, kicking him, throwing him over tables, and it just keeps happening. I genuinely like kind of enjoyed that. But eventually James does sneak attack him and actually pushes him through the door to the basement. And while trying to get James off of him, Archer looks down to see all the children in the basement. We end up cutting back to like some chase scenes with Alex and his parents that aren't really that important to the plot. And then we get back to Justine still pushed up on this cabinet by Paul. And she gets a hold of Paul's gun off of his waist, and she's like begging him, please, but he's not responsive. He's in like a rabid state. And she shoots him in the neck, like right here, and he does not budge. Like it does not faze him at all. Like and then she shoots him in the head, and eventually, finally, he just falls and lets go of her. She then takes the gun and goes and shoots what is that? She then takes the gun and goes and shoots James while he's attacking Archer to get him off of Archer. Then Archer runs down and gets his son, and we end up cutting back up to Alex walking around his aunt's bedroom. And as he's walking around this bedroom, he ends up seeing the tree that his aunt uses to control these people. And he grabs a branch for it before shortly his parents burst in the room. So he has to run into the bathroom with this branch, but before he gets in the bathroom, he grabs his aunt's wig. You see where we're going? You see where we're going? Alex on that diamond. He know what he gotta do. Once Alex gets his aunt's hair like on this branch and ends up, putting his blood on it and breaks it, we actually get one of the funniest scenes from a movie I've seen in a while, a movie that's not supposed to be funny. And I'm gonna just kind of cut it up and show it right here, but it's hilarious. Just rabidly chasing her, and she is just she knows what's up. She knows they're not about to stop. I don't know why she's running, but she is trying her absolute best to get away from these little fuckers. And while all of this is going on, Alex's parents are still trying to attack him, and Archer has Justine in a chokehold. And the kids eventually catch Gladys, and they end up ripping her apart, which I guess ends up freeing everyone from her spell. But I don't know, man. And after that happens, everyone ends up being freed of the curse, but it doesn't make them go back to normal instantly. But actually, Archer is completely back to normal pretty quickly. And I think it has something to do with how long they were under it. Because Archer goes back to normal, instantly starts looking for Matthew, but all of the children are still kind of the narrator even says, some of them even started saying their first words this year. It's taken a minute for them to get back to normal. Alex's parents even are being fed soup somewhere by someone else instead of Alex, and he went on to live with another aunt, this one being a nice one. These are the exact words. And that brings about the end of the movie. It kind of just ends just like that. It kind of just ends right there. But overall, I think I'd probably give this movie a 6, or maybe a 6.5 to 7, because although it really intrigued me and I liked the way it was written with the different chapters, I feel a lot was kind of just left to what the fuck is going on. A lot of it was carried by shock value. In my opinion, I'm not a movie critic, but that's just what I felt. Now I wanted to save this to the end because I can't stand when a person asks you to do these things before you've even gotten a chance to digest their content. But if you did enjoy the video, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and comment what movie or show I should talk about next.
Tonight's the night. And it's going to happen again and again.